Hello and welcome to another video. So on January 4th, it was World Braille Day, and it was the birthday of Louis Braille, who is the person who created Braille. And as a blind person and a person who loves to read, Braille is very important. And so I thought I would take the time to talk to you a little bit about it and answer common questions about it. I wanted to make this video earlier, maybe on January 4th, but due to reasons I couldn't until now, so it's a bit late, but better later than never, I guess. So now I will get on with the video. Now I will start this video by answering probably the most common thing is, what is Braille? I imagine most people are at least somewhat familiar with the idea and concept of Braille, but I wanted to go a little more in depth. So for those that don't know, Braille is a writing system. It consists of 6 dots, and you use those 6 dots to make combinations that can represent letters, numbers, and punctuations, and stuff like that. And it is a tactile writing system that is used by the blind and visually impaired so that they can read with their fingers instead of their eyes. And there's at least for English, there's 2 kinds of Braille. There's grade 1 Braille, which resembles print a little bit, but in dot form. Everything in grade 1 Braille is written letter by letter, like how you would write it in English. But grade 2 Braille is a little bit more complicated, because with grade 2 Braille you have contractions that use a couple of Braille signs to represent one word or a group of letters, which is not something that you do in English writing. So for example, if you wanted to write the word the, that is represented with one sign, whereas you would just write THE in print. Or if you wanted to write sparkle, let's say, the AR in that is represented by one symbol, and we have a bunch of those for many different words and many different groups of sounds. And so grade 2 Braille alphabet is a bit longer than the standard 26 letters, 10 numbers, and I don't really know how many punctuation that is used for English. So yeah, that's a little bit about Braille. The next thing is, how do you produce Braille? There are multiple ways of doing this. The most common, I would say, is to use a Perkins Brailler, which is a machine that kind of resembles an old-fashioned typewriter, and the paper is inserted and you use your 6 keys to make the Braille, and then there's some other things like a space and a new line and backspace, and then you have like the little carriage so you can go to the start of the line. So yeah. And the original way to make Braille, which I have never used in my life, so this may not be the best explanation, but it is called a slate and stylus, where you use the slate as like the braille thing or whatever, and then use the stylus to actually poke braille into the paper. And this is kind of complicated because you actually have to write every braille dot backwards from how it is originally written, because you write from right to left, and then when you flip the paper over, the braille is supposed to be written correctly from left to right, which sounds very time consuming, and I don't know if I'd be very good at using that, but it was the original way that people made braille, and it is the cheapest way of making braille. And the last way that I know of, that I have limited experience with these, but I do want to get one someday, is a braille display or a braille note taker, which are similar, but they have their differences, but they are both ways of making digital braille. So those are like modern technologies where a braille display is typically connected to another device, so like a mobile phone or a computer, and everything on that device would be displayed in braille on the braille display, and you can also write with them. They have a keyboard. A braille note taker is more of a standalone device. It's kind of like a computer for the blind. From my understanding, you can do a lot more independent tasks with it without needing another device, like surfing the internet and stuff like that. So those are some ways that braille can be made. This next question is one that I hear often. It is, why don't blind people just read raised letters instead of having their own alphabet and everything? So this is actually a good question, because on the outside it does seem, simple. Just raise the letters and then we can all read and write the same. But this is actually very difficult. But it was how blind people used to read before Louis Braille made braille, because he wanted a more efficient way to do this, because it is not efficient, because you have to trace each individual line with your finger, and that can be very difficult. For example, like if you might, sorry, I heard a weird noise. You might feel a letter O when it is actually a letter Q, and you just missed the tail at the bottom. And it takes a very long time to read a single word, let alone a sentence or a paragraph, etc. So just like print is designed to be read with your eyes, Braille is designed specifically with your fingertips in mind, and that is why we do that. However, a lot of the times, Braille, when it's labeled in public spaces or on certain items, it will often come with raised print as well. And I do think that this is a good thing, because not every blind person can read Braille, and those things still should be accessible to them. But if you can learn Braille, it's probably a better option than feeling print with your fingers. So yeah. Another thing I often hear is, why is Braille still important, even though there's technology that can just read to blind people? The reason why Braille is still important is mostly because Braille provides literacy that audio can't. Braille can give you a better understanding of written language, and if you're only listening to audio and not reading, you won't learn how to spell or use proper punctuations and stuff like that. And so while I do love my audio books and stuff like that, I do not think that it's a good replacement for Braille. I feel like Braille is just as important as it was when it was first created. And we should try and promote Braille literacy among the blind, because only 10% of blind people know Braille, and it can be very helpful. It's a lot faster than typing or using dictation and having to correct all the errors. And also, some people just aren't that good at listening to information and then taking all of that in, and they may want to, just like how a lot of sighted people prefer to actually see things than listen to them, a blind person may want to feel them with their hands, like Braille, instead of listening to a bunch of information and being expected to take that in. Plus, there are also deaf blind people who may not prefer audio. So yeah, Braille is very important, and I feel like we should be trying to make it more accessible, because it is very hard to access. A lot of the times, Braille materials are very expensive, and the more people who can read Braille, I imagine the easier it'll be to come across, because maybe people will lower the prices on things a bit if more people are buying them. So yeah, that is why Braille is still important, even though there is audio, because it's just not the same thing. But both are very useful to the blind, either way. Another thing that I'm often asked is, why do we have contractions? What is the point of making the alphabet more complicated with all of these short form words and things that you have to remember? So while contractions may seem intimidating at first, they're actually super helpful. One, they shorten the Braille quite a bit when it's being written, because Braille does take up more space than print. And so it can take up a whole lot of paper, even with contracted Braille. But it does significantly shorten it, so it can make it slightly portable and use a bit less paper. Plus, reading with your fingers usually isn't as fast as reading with your eyes. I don't know if this is true, because I can't see and I've never been able to see, but the way that it's been described to me is that sighted people can just quickly skim over something and get the idea of what it says. But for Braille, you have to read each individual letter to understand stuff, and so it's a bit slower. And so when you can just put your finger on one or two things and it can mean a whole word, then it does speed up the process of reading. So those are reasons why contractions are helpful, and it can make writing faster too. So yeah, contractions are pretty hard to learn, but honestly, I've gotten so used to them. The other day I was trying to type using Braille screen input for my journal, and I was trying to see if I could do uncontracted Braille or grade 1 Braille, and it was very difficult. I was like, oh my gosh, I need my contractions. How are people just doing this? So yeah, you get used to them, and they aren't so bad. And the last thing that I wanted to talk about that is sometimes asked is, can sighted people learn Braille? And the answer is yes. Actually, I think all of the people in my life who have taught me Braille or worked with me on Braille were sighted. And so yeah, sighted people can read Braille. They typically can read it with their eyes better than they can with their fingers, though. And I think most of the sighted people I know who can read Braille read with their eyes, but it's probably possible to read with your fingers, maybe just a bit harder, since I guess they aren't as sensitive, but it is totally possible. And I'm not sure if I'll be able to do this, but I did find a Braille cheat sheet. This is UEB, Unified English Braille, and I'm gonna see if I can link it in the description or maybe in the comments to see if so that people can see the Braille alphabet. But if there isn't any links, then you could probably just search it up for yourself. So yeah, that's all I have to say for now. I hope that you learned something new today and that this video was interesting and educational, because I really do like Braille. I mean, I've had my issues with it in the past. I feel like most blind people do, but at the end of the day, it's a very useful tool for me and for many others, and I think that it's important to learn about it and promote it so that more people are able to read it. So yeah, I can't talk. Bye for now. I think I'm gonna make other videos soon because I wanted to make some videos while the new year is still fresh, because they're, kind of New Year's related. So yeah, I'm hoping to do those this week as well. But I hope everyone has an amazing, awesome day.